Tidjane Salaun's draft stock is skyrocketing during a very strong end to his season. This is Floor and Ceiling, let's break him down. Given that he does not turn 19 until mid-August, Tidjane Salaun is one of the youngest and most interesting prospects in the 2024 draft class. The French wing plays for Cholet, and he's had a relatively productive season for a first-year 18-year-old pro. In 54 games across all leagues so far, Salaun is averaging a little under 10 points per game to go with 4 rebounds, 1 assist, and 1 steal. Right now, Salaun remains incredibly raw, but I think he's a fairly intuitive scorer already who has demonstrated real growth over the course of a single season. At this stage, most of what Salaun does revolves around scoring, but he's shown some appealing flashes combining his shot making with his athleticism. Of course, the natural question is when the Frenchman will be ready for regular minutes in the NBA. He's still quite green, and like we'll get into, this is very evident on tape. Salaun's role for Cholet was kept relatively simple for most of the season, although if I compared him to Zachary Rizachet, who also played in the French First Division, I thought Salaun had a little bit more liberty. Still, his function on the team for the most part was to be that quote-unquote fifth guy in the corner who shoots spot-ups, plays out of lifts and sinks, and is generally active off the ball. So far this season, Salaun is shooting a little less than 32% from 3, but the sample size that we're dealing with is pretty large. The French prospect has taken 237 shots from deep this season, and he puts up almost 4.5 triples a night, which is nice volume for an 18-year-old. Like we'll get into, the conversion rate needs to improve, but I think the foundations are there for Salaun to shoot from 3 down the line. Salaun takes a nice amount of shots, but I also found his shot diversity to be encouraging. He's not sprinting into movement 3s or anything, but he did look increasingly comfortable as the season went on, and he's not just shooting wide open looks. Salaun can already kinda move into catch and shoots, and everything with his shot will need to be quickened and streamlined, but again, I think the means exist for him to shoot well. Even though Salaun is making 3s in the low 30s at this stage, he is forcing defenders to close out on him at this level, which is important. That means that he has some gravity as a shooter, which in turn opens up the option to make decisions off the catch. For the most part, I've liked what I've seen from Salaun attacking closeouts, even if the end result can still be mixed. The Frenchman definitely has the skills and tools to be productive after dealing with a hasty closeout, and right now, I think this is most apparent with Salaun's ground coverage on offense. The Cholet prospect can get to the rim in a dribble or two, but then I do want Salaun to play more physically and assertively. The 18-year-old needs to start playing through contact more and really just living more at the rim and in the paint. Salaun has the bounce, length, and size to do this, plus his frame should fill out nicely, so he needs to be more imposing once he gets downhill. However, I understand that this is tough as an 18-year-old first-year pro, so this is more about establishing a building block looking ahead to the NBA. I also want to mention that some very interesting flashes have taken place when Salaun has opted to shoot rather than drive when a defender is running at him. Now, these shots don't go in consistently, but there are glimpses of Salaun sidestepping a defender into a one-dribble 3, or he's also willing to step into the mid-range for the pull-up jumper. Again, these are not consistent makes at all, but I do think they show Salaun's potential as a shooter. As I just broke down, Salaun is athletic and rangy with how he occupies space, so another effective role for him is as a cutter. As I'll get into, right now, this is how Salaun is at his most efficient near the basket. At a little over 6'10", with a 7'1"-ish wingspan, Salaun has NBA size, and I also think that he's an NBA vertical athlete. I really like that the Frenchman is not just static, because he easily could be given the amount of time that he spends off the ball. Having the 18-year-old wing cut out of the corner was almost always an option for Cholet this season, and we saw this time and time again. Salaun can use an ongoing pick and roll to cut in behind the defense, catch lobs, and generally finish above the rim. I also like when he moves quickly almost immediately after passing the ball, which is another way of leveraging that same athleticism. I get that none of this might scream superstar, but I think everything we've seen so far is low-hanging fruit that Salaun should be able to do early on in the NBA, where I'm curious to see him in even more pace and space. Salaun has everything it takes to be dangerous in transition, but the European game is usually slower than the NBA still. This season, we've seen Salaun receive and finish in the open court, but the goal in a few years should be for him to be able to reliably grab and go off of defensive rebounds. At the end of the day, however, we're talking about an 18-year-old prospect who remains incredibly green. Salaun definitely deserves props for producing how he's done, but there's still a ton of development ahead of him. The great news is that he has a reputation for working really hard and living in the gym. Like I mentioned, Salaun's improvement, even over the course of this very season, has been notable. But I'm not truly sure what skill he adds to an NBA team in year one, other than motor, positional size, and athleticism. As a scorer, Salaun is very reliant on being set up. He's not creating for himself, and the results we've seen out of pull-ups this season have not been good. Salaun struggles to create space, his shot selection is still improvable, and he's just not a pull-up threat. That's not to say that he cannot develop this, but a lot of work will 100% be needed in terms of process, mechanics, and live reps. The flashes this season were incredibly scarce, and his percentages were objectively terrible. Another really significant improvement point for Salaun is his finishing, especially in the half court. It's with Salaun's finishing that my concerns about his touch pop up the most. Right now, to put it bluntly, he's just not good here, shooting below the 30th percentile on layups. He can't convert on runners or floaters, and often it feels like he's missing and rushing bunnies from really close range. In turn, this issue counteracts the advantages that Salaun's athleticism, size, and scoring should provide. Being unable to finish on a regular basis also limits Salaun's versatility. So, as we look ahead, I'm hoping to see him consistently make shots when he's attacking closeouts, cutting, and driving. He'll really need to, particularly if he never develops into a good shooter. Salaun has been scoring this season, but he's not done so efficiently at all, and there are valid questions about how this carries over into the league. To start, I'm not overly worried about the efficiency. Salaun is so young, and he's still finding his role, so those are growing pains that I'm factoring in. The percentages will definitely have to improve, but this is more so a concern if it's still a big recurring problem in 3 seasons or so. Besides that, I'm just hoping to see Salaun branch out the ways that he scores, particularly with his jumper. His 3, like I said, is gonna have to go in at a much higher clip, ideally in the mid to high 30s rather than the current low 30s. Just broadly speaking, Salaun's overall shot diet will probably have to change a little bit if he is to return top 10 value. It's not too limited for the right now, but if this makes sense, it's too limited should his offensive development stagnate. In addition to being more aggressive and dependable at the rim, Salaun needs to become way more comfortable pulling up off the dribble. Looking towards the NBA, he's gonna need to find a way to have genuine on-ball gravity because he's still really raw with regards to jump shooting, self-creation, ball handling, and facilitating. Quickly, that's a nice segue into Salaun's passing. Pretty clearly, this is not a vital part of his role right now. He averaged under 1 assist a night, and he has an incredibly low total of 48 assists in 54 games. But ultimately, I'm not really looking for Salaun to manipulate defenses with his playmaking. In the NBA, he profiles as a scorer, but he will still need to make quick decisions and move the ball in a timely way, so that's what I'm focusing on. Even though Salaun's first choice is almost never to pass, I think he's had some okay reads over the course of the year. Once he gets a paint touch, he can scan and find the open man a little bit, and this option should be there for Salaun when he attacks closeouts or drives to the basket. Really, these basic reads should make up most of what he needs, but of course, I wonder if the potential is there to tap into Salaun as a passer in transition. I think it's in the open court where his gifts would really shine. However, Salaun's feel, like the rest of his game, is really underdeveloped. He's so raw as a whole that it can feel like he's out there on the court just improvising. Most of his turnovers right now are avoidable, but that's also why they can be concerning. Being unable to make simple reads could be very problematic early on in the NBA. For Salaun, this can mean playing sped up, losing his handle, attempting too much outside of his role, or making iffy decisions against the second level of defense. These things are all fixable, but they speak to the developmental time that will need to be invested in Salaun. Lastly, I predict that a considerable part of this development will be about ensuring that Salaun can play the 5 down the line. Right now, I'm confident that he cannot read the floor on either end at a high enough level to do this, but I think multi-positionality and mismatchiness are big parts of Salaun's appeal. In particular, I'm focusing on 2 things here, which are the Cholet prospect's screening and his rebounding. Even though these clips feature Salaun crashing the offensive glass, I thought that he only really started doing this with intention late on in the season. Again, Salaun has the athletic tools to get much more from this, especially if he's to play the 5. This also takes me to how he sets picks, which is honestly just a technique issue. Salaun's screens barely connects, and he really lacks a certain physicality. Because of this, he doesn't help create space for his ball handler, which in turn also limits Salaun's own opportunities to get fed. For all of Tidjane Salaun's flashes and production on offense, the defense really remains entirely theoretical. Really, I think that teams are going to have to be willing to bet on the Frenchman's physical profile, motor, and ability to learn, because right now, Salaun is almost at 0 on this side of the ball. The few moments in which he is impactful generally come down to his athletic makeup. That means his explosive first step, ground coverage ability, and length. Salaun has been alright at times, jumping the passing lanes and such, but by and large, he is still very ineffective all over the floor. This is an issue for many reasons, obviously, but I think my biggest concern here is how it limits Salaun's ability to slide up and down positions. In space, Salaun should have the agility to keep smaller players in front. There have been some flashes, but for the most part, he guards too upright at this juncture, and he is very prone to blow-bys on the perimeter. Don't get me wrong, Salaun does not have to be a point-of-attack defender or anything of that sort, but really, it's just that he can barely contain a drive right now. As we get closer to the rim, Salaun's frame should fill out well, but like on offense, his physicality needs improvement on this end. The French wing is not resistant enough in the post, both in terms of strength and positioning. His rim protection, as well, is honestly non-existent for the most part. As of now, he only has 10 blocks in 54 games, so that's super low for a 6'10" forward with a 7'1" wingspan. All of this is to say that whichever team drafts Salaun is going to need patience with him on both ends, but even much more so on defense. There's a very high chance that the NBA moves way too fast for the French prospect in his first couple of seasons, but the tools are there for Salaun to have a big leap down the line, even if right now the buy-in is almost entirely aesthetic and theoretical. I really cannot see Tidjane Salaun falling out of the top 12 in this year's draft. Offensively, he's super interesting with the potential to be a power wing who shoots the three, can move off the ball, and hopefully at 6'10", create his own pull-up a little bit in the future. Defensively, as we just broke down, Salaun is going to need major work, but given the tools that he has, I'm not sure teams are going to need much convincing about being able to develop him. As always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Tidjane Salaun, and if you enjoyed the channel, if you want to watch more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll catch you guys next time.